I really want to do this recipe at some point, chat. Holy shit, y'all.
Whenever you see an Old West saloon in a TV show or a movie, they're always drinking. They're never eating. But people did eat at Old West saloons.
They sure did.
Not only did they eat,
Yeah.
but often the lunch was free. And that free
lunch was
could be
free?
anything from a sandwich to oysters to a big bowl of the classic cowboy dish, pork and beans.
Pork and beans.
So thank you to Squarespace for
There we
sponsoring this
go.
video as we see what it was like to eat in an Old West saloon.
Let's go.
This time on Tasting History.
Let's go. Hell yeah.
Today I am in the old mining town, the old ghost town of Cerro Gordo,
Cerro
which is in
Gordo.
California, right off of Death Valley. Back in the late 19th
Two
and
of the
early
four
20th
basic
century,
food
it was
groups,
home
yeah,
to
right?
miners working in the nearby silver, lead, and zinc mines. So of course it included
Oh,
several
that's
saloons.
really
Saloons
neat,
that would
Tapper.
feed in water to
Wow.
miners when they
God, I
came
love how
down from
creative
trying
my
to find their
community is.
fortune.
Holy cow.
Now whether you were in
I
a big
love
city
how
like
creative
San
y'all are,
Francisco
like, honestly.
or a small mining town like Cerro Gordo,
30-minute
when you
video, what I
walked
was
into
thinking
a
of, but
saloon,
that's a
you
bit
could
long.
expect a drink,
Understandable,
and you could
Bird,
almost
yeah.
always
I will
expect
check
some
that
food.
out. I will
Now,
check that
what
out on my own
food
time,
was
though. That sounds
really
very
ran the
interesting.
gamut. They had like fancy French cuisine,
What?
with French chefs in a lot of these places, even in small towns.
That's crazy.
But then some saloons had, you know, pickled eggs and pretzels, just like you would find in many bars today.
Okay, that
but
checks.
George Ade, when he was writing, in I believe the 1930s, he was writing about the saloons that he remembered when he was young. And he said, right in the center of the soiled table cover, you might have found a bowl of baked beans, and alongside of it, a glass of troubled water. And in the glass
Troubled
were immersed
water.
several forks, which the evidence
no.
indicated had been used in hoisting beans.
Ah.
So the baked beans I'm making, the
Oh,
troubled
no.
water with utensils in it, which is basically dirty water that people have been using their utensils over and over.
No,
I'm not doing that because that's gross.
That's
Now, I found
gross.
lots
That's
and lots of
disgusting.
recipes for baked beans, but since saloons were making these foods for profit, I figured I would use the recipe from Cooking for Profit, which was produced with the restaurants and
Appropriately
saloons of the
named.
Old West in mind.
Appropriately
It was originally
named.
published in
Okay,
San Francisco
okay.
Hotel Gazette
Yeah.
in 1886 and says baked pork and beans. Wash and pick over a large heaping cupful of navy beans and steep them in water overnight. Put them on
Right,
next morning with
okay,
fresh
yeah,
water to
yeah.
more than cover and baking soda the size of a bean and let boil about an hour. Then carry them to the
Interesting,
sink,
yes.
pour all in a colander, letting the water run away, and put back into the saucepan with cold water enough to come up to a level. Boil again, and in a few minutes they will be soft. Season with a little salt and a tablespoon of molasses.
And molasses?
Put them into
Wow.
4-pint bowls or tin pans, lay an ounce of salt pork on each.
Salt-
and
ooh,
bake for
salt
half an
pork,
hour.
okay.
Very simple. I actually found some even simpler recipes that are literally just pork and beans. Nothing else, no molasses or even salt.
Interesting.
Then I found some really complicated ones that have
All of
cayenne
his
and,
friends.
and
There
onion
you
and,
go,
and lots of
Akira.
other seasoning. So if you want to
Well
add
done.
more seasoning, by all means,
You're
do so.
imparting
But for me,
good
I'm
knowledge.
following the recipe and starting with 1 1/4 cup of navy beans, 4
alright.
ounces of salt pork, scored and then cut into 4 slices, a pinch of baking soda, a
Pinch.
teaspoon of salt,
okay.
and 1 tablespoon of molasses.
Molasses.
So first, take the beans and cover them with water and let them sit overnight. You can also rinse your pork at this time.
I'm sorry. The soaking the beans overnight. Brings back the memory of the B. Dylan Hollis video. Good night. Good morning. Same energy. Same energy. So these took a long bath last night. Good night. Good morning. Amazing. Amazing. Amazing.
You're using salt pork, which can be hard to find, so you can also use bacon, which you don't need to rinse, but if you're using salt pork, you want to rinse it a couple times. Put it in water, let it sit for about an hour, then dump it out, add more water, let it sit because it is really salty. Now once the beans are soaked, there shouldn't be any water left. They should have soaked up pretty much all of the water. If there is any water, dump it out. Otherwise, put them into a pot and sprinkle with the baking soda and add fresh water, just enough to cover them, plus about a 1/2 inch. Now here we have a decision to make because every other recipe that I found for pork and beans has you add the pork at this point. But this recipe doesn't have you add the pork until it's baking.
Interesting.
The problem with that is the pork will not be cooked.
Nope.
And it needs to be cooked. So I'm guessing the recipe author just skipped that step or missed that step or has the pork cooked elsewhere, you know, like on a skillet. I don't know.
Oh God,
But
Doc.
I'm
Yeah,
going to
no,
go ahead
you
and
gotta
add mine now because
you gotta
it's going
prep
to
the
also
salt pork
add
because
some
good God.
much needed flavor. So add it to the beans and let the pot come to a boil, and then set the lid on and let the beans cook for 1 hour. Every once in a while, lift the lid and try to skim off any of the scum, but pretty much leave it for an hour. At that point, strain the water out of the beans, then add some cold water just enough to be level with the beans, and bring it to a boil until they're nice and soft. This should take about 10 minutes. Then remove the pork and add the salt and molasses and stir them into the beans to coat them. Now this recipe has you putting it into 4 different dishes because it's meant to be served to, different people like at a restaurant. But at a saloon, it would have often just been on the free lunch table, one big old pot. So I'm just putting them into one big tin dish. So once the beans are in the dish, set the pork on top and place the whole thing in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 Celsius for a half hour. Now saloons in the Old West, especially in a small town like Cerro Gordo, were so much more than just a watering hole. As the first building that often went up, a saloon
I really
want to
try this recipe, chat. Oh man,
barber shop,
I'm also getting really hungry watching these.
Or even a church should a pastor come through. But on the daily, it was for food and drink. So other than baked beans,
saloons are basically like your catch-all kind of building.
Into an Old West saloon.
They really were just sort of your catch-all sort of building
So the
back in
exact
the day.
definition of a saloon is kind of up for debate. One definition is any place that serves food and drink but makes most of their money through the drink.
Through the drink, yeah.
Historically, that definition doesn't always work, but for our purposes, it works.
I can make you hungrier. I have lechon. You have lechon, Doc?
The saloon was
You
often
have
the first
lechon?
building
Man!
to go. At first, it was usually nothing more than a tent with a few tables and chairs.
Oh, hey, R2. Oh, thank you.
It was only after the town began to establish itself that they would build a more permanent structure with wooden floors, a polished bar.
I was just talking, like the last time I was talking to my parents, right? Like I was literally just mentioning them. It's been a while since we had lechon or like sisig or anything like that. Like, oh man. Like, damn, it's been a long time. I want lechon now. Holy crap. Also, I hope you're doing well, R2. How's your day been?
Those swinging saloon doors were real. It's not just a thing from the movies. At least
I was about to say those swinging saloon doors
once
had to have been real.
That was invented. Many saloons had those bat wing doors. They're called bat wings because they look like bat wings.
Yeah,
but
look like bat wings.
Behind those bat wing doors, they would have normal doors that could be closed
normal
in case it's cold or whatever. One of the reasons for those batwing doors was to let the smoke out. People were always smoking. And to let fresh, cool air in, kind of create a breeze if you opened up a window. But also, it was at the height that if children were passing by, they couldn't look in and see all the drinking and gambling going on. And there
that's hilarious.
Okay,
that's funny.
As far as gambling goes, the most popular games were poker and faro. Faro isn't really played much today, but in the 19th century, it was often played more than poker because more people could play at once, the odds were better than most games of chance, and it had very simple rules, and it was easy to follow along. Which is always a benefit if you have been drinking heavily, and many people were, at least in a decent
drinking heavily. Lots of work around the house.
Exactly were they drinking?
Using the time to listen to old Tom Clancy audiobooks. Nice. Okay, that's cool.
Was whiskey. And there were 2 types of whiskey usually available. The good stuff. And the less than good stuff.
The less than good stuff.
Was usually the stuff that was bottled back east or else in other countries, like Old Forester bourbon or Dewar's Scotch, and it usually came with a labeled bottle. The not so great stuff is usually produced and bottled out back, and usually it didn't have an actual name. People would give it wonderful names, though, like coffin varnish, cactus juice, tarantula juice, firewater, rot gut.
Oh my god!
These were usually locally distilled neutral grain spirits.
Is that a pet chat redeem? It sure
coffee,
is.
chilies,
Alrighty.
or tobacco, and spiked with ingredients like strychnine, turpentine, or sulfuric acid to give it some kick. Basically, if it was the taste you were after, then you get the good stuff.
Rewind!
Usually locally distilled neutral grain spirits that were flavored with coffee, chilies, or tobacco and spiked with ingredients like strychnine, turpentine, or sulfuric acid to...
Hey, question, what the fuck? Question, what the fuck? Whoa! Whoa! Hold on now. That is insane. What the fuck? Kick like a moose. Seriously. Glass of coffin varnish will send you straight to the grave with a kick. Yeehaw. God damn. Who needs eyesight or a stomach lining? Absolutely insane. Hey, Kingfisher. No, this is Tasting History with Max Miller. Oh my fucking god.
Basically, if it was the taste you were after, then you get the good stuff and you paid for the privilege. But if it was just the effect that mattered, then take the rot gut and you'll get the same effect, if not better, at half the price.
Absolutely
Now, if neither of those drinks tickled your fancy, then most saloons would offer beer and champagne.
Beer and champagne? Wow.
Champagne was actually far more common in the Old West than you might think today. Even here in Cerro Gordo, lots of champagne bottles were found. And one reason was because you could water down whiskey or beer or pretty much whatever.
That checks.
But when you heard a champagne bottle pop, you knew it was champagne.
You knew it was champagne.
Now, one thing I find really interesting about the whiskey and the other hard liquors is today the bartender pours you the drink. You're at their mercy of how much you get. But back in the Old West, that wasn't always the case. It was customary to belly up, nominate your pizen, drink fast, and make room for the next comer. The barkeep didn't put the liquor into glasses. If you asked for scotch or what have you, he'd grab the bottle in his right hand, a glass in his left, cross hands, and plunk the two down before you. You took a small or a big drink as you wished. For 10 cents, the tariff didn't vary. Though I think it really depends on who the...
Can you imagine doing that today? Instead of the bartender pouring you a shot, you poured your own shot? Like, what the hell? That would, ooh, I could see that going bad real quickly. I can see that going bad real quickly. Holy shit. Now, Mom just sent me a text, the picture of a coffee travel mug. On one side, it's got a map of Middle Earth. And on the other side, it says, I've had one coffee, yes, but what about second coffee? Me. That's me, like every fucking day, Tapper. Holy shit, that's me. God.
Man behind the bar was, because many bartenders
probably didn't want to get a drink on the claim.
Reputation for
you know what? Fair, Akito. Yeah.
In reviewing a rich and variegated personal experience of saloons, the feature that stands out most prominently in my recollection is the hard, listless, unfeeling type of man who keeps saloons. The bon ami, the good fellowship supposed by some to prevail among saloon habitués, is totally lacking in saloon keepers. I never knew a saloon keeper who was a really good fellow.
I never knew a saloon keeper was a really good fellow.
Mark Twain, the cheapest and easiest way to become an influential man and be looked up to by the community at large was to stand behind a bar, wear a cluster diamond pin, and sell whiskey. Now, there were bartenders, who were loved by their community and true bon vivants. Those bartenders typically made cocktails. Now, not every saloon served cocktails, but cocktails were a lot more popular in the Old West.
That's news to me. Wow.
They were usually made with whiskey, gin, or brandy, and had names like cobblers, smashes, juleps, flips, and crustas. They typically weren't as complicated as the cocktails of today, but they were a great way to temper the flavor of poor liquor. They could also be an excellent tonic because very often they included bitters which were seen as medicinal. And supposedly they were. Though you should take the temperature of the room when ordering a cocktail, because if you're in a place like Seattle or San Francisco back in the day, order a cocktail by all means. But if you're in a little town like Cerro Gordo and you order a hot gin fizz or a warm toddy, you might be considered to have an educated thirst, and that was not a compliment.
Oh, yeah.
Stick to the whiskey meat. Now,
small town like Cerro Gordo, like, oh, you're too what? You think you're too smart for us? Yeah, I get that. I can see that.
Bars and restaurants today, they ran the gamut. There were those saloons that were a single room.
I had that same tumbler on my throne wish list. It said I had one matcha. Yes, but what about second matcha? Oh, that's great, Comey. Wow, that's so good.
Velvet curtains, crystal chandeliers, silver-framed mirrors
hey, Pepsi Doggo,
and can dancers entertaining the men
every night. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well.
Occidental Saloon in Tombstone,
Arizona. Now that we had a hope if we had lived where good God would permit us to be pirates. That's a very good quote, Kingfisher. Yeah.
Leg of lamb with oysters, an assortment of cold meats, boiled meats, roast meat like suckling pig or pork with applesauce. Fashionable dishes like cream fricassee of chicken and lapine domestique with desserts of custard
The
and fruit
fancy
pies
ass
and
saloon,
plum
what the
pudding.
fuck?
French cuisine had become all the rage in America at
Damn.
the time, and that included the Old
I have a
West.
coffee mug
Even
with the
over
Helldiver skull in
in
it. Good
Death
shit.
Valley,
Good shit, Akido.
is
Yeah.
that way. There was a French restaurant in the 1800s, which is just
Had to wait
crazy.
3
There's no
fucking hours
French
for the room to get
restaurant there
inspected.
now.
Oh.
But for every one of these
That's unfortunate.
fancy saloons, there were probably half a dozen that were more middle of the road. They offered merchant lunches, which typically cost 10 or 15 cents and included a beer along with a little stew or baked beans or roast beef or mashed potatoes and gravy. Then there was the
Want me to
free
pet-
lunch,
you want me to
which
pet
was
shot
a
again for
staple
Pepsi
of
Doggo?
saloon
Oh,
culture
okay. Yeah.
throughout the country in the late 19th century.
There you
It
go.
wasn't exactly free. Essentially, what you did was you went into the saloon and you bought a drink. And
Oh,
for
yeah,
the
that-
price
see?
of that one drink, you got full access to a lunch table.
Huh, that's interesting. So you buy one drink, you get all the free food you can eat. Wow. That's a hell of a deal. God damn. All right. All right. That's a hell of a good deal. Holy shit. I think, okay, I have two favorite mugs of mine that I own. I have two favorite mugs of mine that I own. One is a coffee mug that I got while I was still at culinary school. It's got the Culinary Institute of America logo on one side, and on the other side it says "Baker's Gonna Bake." Because I was part of the baking and pastry program. It was really fun. My other favorite mug is what I like to call my D&D mug, because it's a mug that's shaped like a D20. It's a mug that's shaped like a D20. And like the lid of the mug completes the look of the D20, so it keeps your drink warm. It's really good. It's really, really good.
And usually the food that you got to eat was worth far more than the price of that drink.
Nice.
So it was incumbent on the bartender to make sure you kept drinking. So they could make their money back.
Exactly.
The cheapest places for men are supposed to be the so-called free lunches, though this is probably a mistake. For these free lunches are attached to bars, and it is expected that their guests shall patronize the bar sufficiently to pay all favors they get in the way of free food.
Oh, Ian, I love
San
Micro
Francisco
Center.
saloons were especially famous.
Ian, I love Micro Center because it's a Micro Center like 20 minutes from me. And when I was building my new computer many years ago, my current computer, when I was shopping for parts, I just went down to the Micro Center. They're so good. I love them. Oh, I love Micro Center.
For their free lunches. In 1891, Rudyard Kipling, who wrote The Jungle Book,
yeah.
came through San Francisco and went into a saloon in which men with hats on the back of their heads were wolfing food from a counter. It was the institution.
Colby, Micro Centers are so good.
You paid for a drink and got as much as you wanted to eat. For something less than a rupee a day, a man can feed himself sumptuously in San Francisco, even though he be a bankrupt.
My closest Micro Center is 4 hours away. Oh no, Guilford. Oh no.
Now, just because it was free does not mean that it wasn't still quality food. One meal included a monster silver boiler filled with a most excellent oyster soup, a round of beef that must have weighed at least 40 pounds, vessels filled with potatoes, stewed mutton, stewed tomatoes, and macaroni à la française. All that for the cost of a 15-cent drink, which even with inflation would be like $4.25, basically for all you can eat.
Wow.
And you get a drink. The thing
That's
is,
fucking crazy. Holy shit.
There was a lot of competition. The different saloons began upping the quality and the quantity of their food to
location
outdo
Indianapolis.
each
They
other.
offered a custom
And
mug for early arriving
eventually they
customers.
made it
Oh,
so
that's cool as
nobody could
shit,
drink
Ian.
enough
Yo, that's
to
awesome.
outweigh the cost of these free lunches. So all the saloons started losing money. As far back as November of 1854, the saloon owners of San Francisco got together to put a stop to these free lunches. But after 2 meetings, they realized that even if just a few saloons held out and kept offering them, then they would get all the patrons. So free lunches are still on tap for the freeloaders. And there were indeed some freeloaders. It was not uncommon for people to just walk into the saloon, walk up to the lunch table, and start eating.
That's what I thought.
Should this inexplicable lunch fiend not happen to be called to drink, he devours whatever he can.
That's what I thought people would start doing.
Unnoticed. Of course, in smaller towns like Cerro Gordo, the free lunch usually wasn't
POV
so
me.
popular, partly because they didn't have as much competition with other saloons. Also, what you got usually depended on who ran the saloon, who was the cook in the back.
Indianapolis Skyline, IndyCar, very Indiana pride. Nice.
that would serve chop suey and chow mein. Very,
Whoa,
very popular
really?
in the Old West.
Huh.
Lots of German saloons that had different sausages.
I had
like
no idea saloon
bratwurst
food was this varied.
sauerkraut
That's
on
really
the
fucking
menu.
cool.
And then, of course,
Wow.
there were a lot of Mexican saloons because until 1848,
Yep.
California and most of the Southwest,
most of the Southwest
was Mexico.
was part of
and
Mexico.
So they would
Yeah,
have pozole and tamales on the menu. And most of all of
nice.
the free lunches would have an assortment
Now
of
I'm
things like
stupid hungry.
cheeses
Holy
and
shit.
pickles and little cold meats and clams and oysters.
Mm-hmm,
Oysters were incredibly popular in America at the time as a whole.
Kingfisher, I'm
but
aware.
Especially
I'm aware. Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
Old West among cowboys and miners. You don't usually watch an Old Western and see people eating oysters, but they did
more
a
saloon
lot.
grub than
Sometimes
beans,
they
bacon,
were
whiskey, and
fresh
lard, yeah.
oysters. They were coming in on trains and stuff from places like San Francisco.
Oh man, I had
lot
a
of
really
times,
good dinner the
especially
other
in
night.
smaller
There's
towns that
a
were further away from the trains. You would have
there's a
oysters.
Mexican
Then there
place
was
near
another
me, and they
category
had
of food
really
that
good
was
tacos,
almost
and I
always
went there
sure
and I got
to
tacos for
be
dinner last
available
night.
at
Oh,
every lunch. These included sundry pretzels, crackers,
So
bits
good.
of cheese and
So good.
sausage, and a salt pickle or a radish. A repast intended to provoke thirst rather than to satisfy
oh
hunger.
yeah.
Salty snacks
So you
are
bought
still
more
common at
drinks.
bars today
Yeah.
because they do make you
Yep.
more thirsty. And
Make you more
pretzels and
thirsty,
salted
ergo
peanuts,
you buy more
those are
drinks,
still at
ergo
many
the bar
bars.
gets more
But
money.
One thing
Yeah, that
didn't
checks.
really make
That checks.
the leap to today is the sardelle. A limp,
what?
silver-coated minnow, a relative of the sardine, saturated with brine and probably sold by the hogshead, became one of the staple standbys of every saloon catering to a reliable beer trade. They were
Yeah, no, I'm
saltier
good.
than the seven
Yeah, no, I'm
seas
good.
and were served whole. They were in great favor because
Yeah, no,
the
I'm good.
patron, after he had taken a couple of them draped across a slab of rye bread, had to rush to the bar and drink a
Semi-local
lot
chain
of beer
called
to
Pancho
get the
Villa's
taste out
Taco
of his
Shop.
mouth.
It's absolutely
The
amazing.
sardellen were more
Yo.
than fish. They were silent partners. So now we
Damn.
know what they drank and what they ate at an Old West saloon. My question is,
Miss
how did they
Froggy, I
eat?
was
What did they
very
look like?
I
when
was
they were
really
eating?
close to banning you for a second because that was
communities
something
where
that's something a
men
bot would do
outnumbered
in
women
chat.
20,
Good
30,
God.
40
I was
to
this
1,
close to
if
dropping the
not
ban
more.
hammer on
So
you. Holy
table
shit.
manners, I'm thinking, weren't so great. And luckily, there was a rather prudish Englishman who
Sold by the
went into a
hogshead.
saloon
Americans
in
will use
Ogden,
anything but the
Utah
metric
in the
system.
1880s
Right.
And wrote
Right.
about it. I saw a performance that filled me with astonishment and dismay.
Uh-oh.
It was a man eating his dinner. And let me here remark, with all possible courtesy, that the American on his travels is the most reprehensible eater I have ever seen. He never apparently chews his food, but dabs and pecks at the dishes one after the other with the rapidity which merely as a juggling trick might be performed in London to crowded houses every day. Every now and then he shuts his eyes and strains his throat. This, I suppose, is when he swallows, for I have seen children getting rid of cake with the same sort of spasm. What I love is that next he includes a list of what the man is eating. The mixture
Holy
of his
shit.
food, if it pleases him, does not annoy me. For if a man likes to eat mouthfuls of
Man, you
huckleberries,
just
bacon,
with such
apple
fucking
pie,
contempt,
pickled mackerel,
yeah.
peas, mutton, gherkins, oysters, radishes, tomatoes, custard, and poached eggs.
That's a lot.
This is a bona fide meal copied from my notebook on the spot. In discriminate confusion, it
How
has
does this guy see
nothing
me
to do
eat
with
through
me.
there?
He says that this entire meal lasted all but 5 minutes.
What the
and
fuck?
He grabbed a handful of toothpicks and leans idly against the doorpost.
Did he just,
as
like-
if time were without limit or end?
Is this man
The
Kirby?
whole
Did
thing
he
is a
just like
mystery to me.
inhale
So to
everything?
honor
What the
rugged
fuck?
pioneers of the American West,
What
I
the
feel
fuck?
that I should drop all semblance of civility as I eat my
That's
pork and
insane.
beans, which
What the
should be
hell,
about ready.
dude?
And here we are, baked pork and beans.
Oh my
from a
God,
Wild
that looks
West saloon.
delicious. Holy shit.
Bon appetit.
Oh, that looks so fucking tasty. Hello?
I love baked beans. Really good. They could be a little softer, I will say that, but they're not like too firm. I just like a soft. I like
He
a
then went on to
softer
fight King
bean.
DDD.
But the flavor is outstanding. It's actually
Yeah, this looks
so much
real
better
fucking
than what
tasty.
you get in a can.
Yo.
Even though there's like nothing to it. There's no onion, there's no spice or anything. It's just that molasses and the salt
Yeah.
pork. That salt pork, I think, really adds a lot of flavor. Now,
Yeah, I was about to say you're gonna
I'm
get a
not
lot of
huge
flavor just with
one to,
salt pork
take-
alone.
Eat the pork from pork and beans because it's usually just really fatty, as is this. But I'm gonna take a bite just to see.
Why the hell not?
It's really fatty. It's really good.
Salt pork is life.
Yeah.
What up, Kay?
It's
How's
really
it going,
good.
bud?
I'm gonna be eating these tonight while I'm here. Mighty fine. So as always, I will get this recipe up on the Tasting History website.
Incredible. Incredible. I would definitely want to try this recipe. Holy moly.